Ethan Carter stared at the blinking lights on the control panel in front of him. The room was quiet except for the soft hum of machines and the occasional crackle of static from the speakers. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on the desk, his hands clasped tightly together. His face was pale, his eyes tired but focused. Beside him, Rachel Monroe adjusted her headset, trying to block out the noise in her mind as much as the interference coming through the comm system. The two of them were alone now, the last people left on what had once been Earth's most advanced deep space communication hub. It was a lonely place, floating somewhere in the vast emptiness between stars. Once, it had been a hub of activity, buzzing with scientists, engineers, and soldiers working around the clock to keep humanity connected to the rest of the galaxy. Now it felt like a tomb, a hollow reminder of everything they had lost. Rachel sighed and glanced at Ethan. "Do you think anyone will hear us?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Ethan didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached for the keyboard in front of him and began typing slowly, deliberately. Each keystroke echoed in the silence, filling the room with a sense of finality. When he finished, he leaned back in his chair and read the message aloud. "To any who receive this, Earth is gone. You chose this war." Rachel frowned. "Is that really how we want to end things? With blame?" "It's not about blame," Ethan said, his tone firm but tinged with sadness. "It's the truth. We didn't start this fight, but we sure as hell gave them a reason to come after us." Rachel looked away, staring at the blank screen in front of her. She knew he was right, but it still hurt to hear it said out loud. Earth hadn't stood a chance against the architects, the mysterious alien force that had descended upon the planet without warning. Cities burned, oceans boiled, and billions died within days. No one even knew why they attacked, or if they were truly alive at all. Some said the architects weren't beings at all but machines, programmed to destroy civilizations that posed a threat to the galaxy. But none of that mattered now. What mattered was survival. And maybe, just maybe, making sure someone out there understood what had happened here. Ethan hit the send button before he could second-guess himself. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The only sound was the faint whirring of the transmitter as the message shot out into the void, traveling faster than light toward destinations unknown. "You know," Rachel said finally, breaking the silence, "there's no guarantee anyone will pick it up. Space is big, really big." "I know," Ethan replied, his voice steady despite the weight of his words. "But it's all we got left." They sat there for a while longer, listening to the hum of the machines and the distant echoes of their own breathing. Outside the windows, the universe stretched endlessly, cold and indifferent. Stars twinkled like pinpricks of hope, but Ethan couldn't help feeling that those tiny sparks were mocking them. Hope was a fragile thing, easily extinguished. Rachel broke the silence again. "Do you ever wonder if we deserved it?" Ethan turned to look at her, surprised by the question. "Deserved what?" "This." She gestured vaguely around the room, then toward the window. "All of it. The war. The destruction. Maybe we pushed too far, reached too high. Maybe we should have stayed on Earth instead of shouting into the dark." Ethan shook his head. "No. Whatever mistakes we made, they don't justify this." He waved a hand at the empty screens and lifeless panels surrounding them. "We're not perfect, but we didn't deserve to be wiped out." Rachel nodded slowly, though she didn't look entirely convinced. They both knew the truth. Humanity had made its share of mistakes, but pointing fingers wouldn't bring Earth back. All they could do now was wait, and hope that somewhere, somehow, their message would find its way to ears willing to listen. Far away from the ruins of Earth, in a quiet corner of the Andromeda Galaxy, Daniel Hayes sat hunched over his workstation. The room was small but filled with screens displaying streams of data, charts, and glowing maps of the stars. His fingers moved quickly across the keyboard, typing commands and adjusting settings as he sifted through the endless noise of the cosmos. Beside him, Grace Bennett leaned closer to her own monitor, her brow furrowed in concentration. The two of them worked late into the night, searching for something, anything, that might explain the strange signals they had picked up earlier. It wasn't uncommon for their research station to detect random bursts of energy or fragments of old transmissions drifting through space. But this signal was different. It was faint, almost like a whisper, but it carried words, human words. "Did you hear that?" Grace asked suddenly, her voice sharp with excitement. Daniel paused, tilting his head toward the speakers. At first, there was only static, but then came the unmistakable sound of a human voice. The message repeated itself over and over, each time clearer than the last. "To any who receive this, Earth is gone. You chose this war." Grace's eyes widened. "That's impossible," she murmured. "Earth fell years ago. Everyone knows that." "I know," Daniel said, his tone low and thoughtful. He replayed the message several times, studying the waveforms on his screen. "But this isn't just some stray broadcast. Someone sent this recently, intentionally." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The weight of the message hung heavy in the air, its meaning sinking in slowly. Earth was gone, a fact they had accepted long ago, but the idea that someone might still be alive out there, sending warnings across the stars, was both thrilling and terrifying. "What does it mean?" Grace asked finally, breaking the silence. "You chose this war. Who are they talking to?" Daniel shrugged, though his mind was racing. "Maybe it's directed at whoever destroyed Earth, or maybe—" He trailed off, considering the possibility. "Maybe it's meant for us, for everyone else." Grace frowned. "Us? Why would they blame us? We didn't do anything." "Not directly," Daniel admitted. "But think about it. Humanity spent centuries shouting into space, broadcasting signals without knowing who, or what, might be listening. Maybe we made a mistake, a big one." Grace shook her head, unwilling to accept the idea. "We can't just assume guilt because of a single message. There has to be more to the story." Determined to find answers, they began digging deeper. Using archived transmissions scattered throughout the galaxy, they pieced together fragments of Earth's history. They discovered reports of alien encounters, debates over humanity's readiness for contact, and warnings from scientists who feared the consequences of unchecked exploration. One document stood out, a report detailing the discovery of an ancient machine buried beneath the surface of Mars. The machine, researchers believed, may have been a beacon designed to attract attention from advanced civilizations. "This could be it," Grace said, pointing to the screen. "If humanity activated that beacon, they might have alerted whatever attacked them." Daniel nodded slowly. "And if that's true, then maybe the message isn't wrong. Maybe we really did choose this war, just not intentionally." As dawn approached, the two of them continued their work, driven by a mix of curiosity and dread. They knew they couldn't ignore what they had found. Whatever secrets lay hidden in the stars, they were determined to uncover them, even if the truth turned out to be more painful than they imagined. Back aboard the crumbling communications hub, Ethan and Rachel tried to keep their spirits alive despite the overwhelming sense of loss that surrounded them. The days blurred together, marked only by the dim glow of control panels and the endless hum of machinery. They rarely spoke about the past. It was too painful, but sometimes memories surfaced unbidden, pulling them back to a time when Earth was still whole. Ethan often found himself thinking about his old life before the war. He had been a school teacher, spending his days teaching history to restless teenagers who rolled their eyes at lessons about ancient battles and forgotten empires. Back then, he never imagined he would live through something far worse than anything in his textbooks. When the invasion began, he joined Earth's defense forces, hoping to protect his wife and daughter. But no amount of training could prepare him for the horror of watching cities crumble and skies burn. In the end, he hadn't been able to save them, or anyone else. Rachel, too, carried her own scars. Before the war, She had been a journalist known for uncovering stories others wanted to bury. She traveled the world, chasing leads and exposing corruption, convinced that shining a light on the truth could make things better. But none of her articles mattered now. The last story she ever wrote detailed the fall of New York City, a grim account of fire raining from the sky and people running in terror. After that, she stopped writing altogether. Words felt useless against the scale of what had happened. Despite their shared grief, Ethan and Rachel leaned on each other to survive. Their bond wasn't born out of friendship or affection, but out of necessity. They were all that remained of humanity's voice in the cosmos, and they couldn't afford to give up. Not yet. One evening, as they sat side by side eating cold rations, Rachel broke the silence. "Do you ever think about starting over?" she asked, her voice soft. Ethan raised an eyebrow. "Starting over where?" "Earth's gone. There's nothing left." "I don't mean Earth," Rachel clarified. "I mean somewhere else. A new colony, maybe. Somewhere we can try again." Ethan shook his head. "We're not explorers, Rachel. We're just two people stuck on a broken ship in the middle of nowhere. Even if we found a habitable planet, what makes you think we'd do any better next time?" Rachel hesitated, unsure how to respond. She knew Ethan was right. They weren't equipped to rebuild a civilization, but the thought of drifting aimlessly until their supplies ran out was unbearable. "Maybe we wouldn't be alone," she said finally. "There are other survivors out there. People hiding, waiting for a chance to fight back." "Fight back?" Ethan chuckled bitterly. "With what? Our fists. Face it, Rachel, humanity lost. We didn't stand a chance against the architects. Whatever they are, they're stronger, smarter, and more ruthless than us. Fighting them is suicide." Rachel fell silent, staring at the floor. She hated hearing those words, even though she knew they were true. Still, a small part of her refused to let go of hope. If Earth's final message reached someone, if it sparked even a glimmer of sympathy or curiosity, maybe help would come. Maybe they wouldn't have to face the future alone. As the hours passed, the hum of the machines grew louder, almost deafening. Ethan closed his eyes, trying to block out the noise. For a brief moment, he allowed himself to imagine a different life, one where Earth was still intact, where his family was safe, and where the stars weren't so cruel. But when he opened his eyes, reality rushed back in like a tidal wave. The past was gone, and the future was uncertain. All they had was the present, and each other. "We'll figure it out," Rachel said suddenly, her voice firm despite the doubt swirling inside her. "We have to." Ethan looked at her, surprised by the determination in her tone. He nodded slowly, though he wasn't sure he believed her. But for now, it was enough to pretend. Daniel and Grace spent the next few days consumed by their discovery. The message from Earth weighed heavily on their minds, its words echoing in their thoughts long after they turned off the speakers. They couldn't shake the feeling that humanity's fate was tied to something far bigger than themselves, something ancient and dangerous. As they dug deeper into the archives, they uncovered more details about the architects. At first, the name seemed like a metaphor, a way to describe the invaders' precision and efficiency. But the truth was more unsettling. According to fragmented records from distant colonies, the architects weren't living beings at all. They were machines, massive, self-replicating constructs designed thousands of years ago by an unknown civilization. Their purpose? To identify and eliminate species deemed too destructive or unstable to coexist with others in the galaxy. Grace stared at the screen, her face pale. "So, they're not invaders," she said slowly. "They're judges." "Executioners," Daniel corrected, his voice grim. "They don't negotiate or show mercy. If they decide you're a threat, they erase you. No questions asked." Grace rubbed her temples, trying to process what they had learned. "But why Earth? What did we do to deserve this?" Daniel hesitated before answering. He didn't want to believe it, but the evidence pointed in one direction. "We broadcasted our presence," he said finally. For decades, humanity sent signals into space, hoping to make contact with alien life. We thought we were ready, but we weren't. We didn't understand the risks. Grace frowned. You're saying we brought this on ourselves? Not intentionally, Daniel replied quickly. But think about it. If the architects are programmed to stop civilizations before they become a problem, then our broadcasts might have looked like a warning sign. Maybe they saw us as aggressive or reckless and decided to act. Grace shook her head, unwilling to accept the idea that humanity's curiosity could lead to such devastation. That doesn't feel right. We can't blame ourselves for wanting to explore, for reaching out. Isn't that what progress is all about? I agree, Daniel said. But progress comes with consequences. And now, because of choices made generations ago, billions of people are dead. The weight of their findings hung over them like a storm cloud. Neither of them spoke for a while, lost in their own thoughts. Grace wondered if humanity truly deserved the label of destructive. After all, Earth had been home to art, science, and countless acts of kindness. Surely those things mattered too. Eventually, Daniel broke the silence. We need to share this, he said firmly. If we can prove that humanity triggered the architects, maybe we can find a way to stop them, or at least warn other civilizations. Grace nodded reluctantly. But who will listen? Most people don't care about Earth anymore. To them, it's just another failed experiment. We'll make them care, Daniel insisted. This isn't just about Earth. It's about understanding the architects and making sure no one else suffers the same fate. Determined to act, they began compiling their research into a report. They included everything: the message from Earth, the history of the architects, and their theory about humanity's role in provoking the attack. By the time they finished, exhaustion had set in, but neither of them felt ready to rest. They knew the road ahead would be difficult, but they also knew they couldn't stay silent. As they prepared to present their findings to their superiors, Grace glanced at Daniel. Do you really think this will change anything? Daniel met her gaze, his expression resolute. I don't know, but if there's even a small chance it could help, Earth's survivors, other worlds, anyone, then it's worth the risk. Grace managed a weak smile. For the first time in days, she felt a flicker of hope. Whatever happened next, they were no longer bystanders. They had chosen to act, to fight for answers in a universe that often seemed indifferent. And maybe, just maybe, that choice would matter. Ethan and Rachel's days aboard the communications hub were growing harder. Supplies were running low, and the ship's systems were failing one by one. The air felt stale, and the silence between them had become heavier than ever. But just when it seemed like all hope was lost, something unexpected happened. A faint transmission broke through the static. At first, they thought it was another random signal, like the ones they had intercepted before. But as Rachel adjusted the frequency, the message became clearer. It wasn't from Earth. It couldn't be. Earth was gone. This voice belonged to someone else, someone still alive and willing to help. To the sender of the recent broadcast, the voice said, calm but firm, "We are the Concordants, a coalition of species dedicated to preserving life in the galaxy. Your message has reached us. If you can reach our nearest outpost within 3 solar cycles, we will offer refuge." Ethan stared at the console, his heart pounding. For weeks, he and Rachel had been alone, clinging to the fragile hope that their message might find someone. Now, against all odds, it had. He turned to Rachel, his face pale but lit with disbelief. "Did you hear that?" he asked, his voice trembling. "I heard it," Rachel replied, her hands gripping the edge of her chair. She looked as stunned as Ethan felt. "They're offering us a way out." But relief quickly gave way to doubt. The Concordance's outpost was light years away, far beyond the range of their damaged ship. Even if they managed to repair it, the journey would be dangerous. Space was vast and unforgiving, and the architects were still out there, patrolling the void. "We don't have a choice," Ethan said finally, his tone resolute. If we stay here, we're dead anyway. At least this gives us a chance. Rachel nodded slowly, though fear lingered in her eyes. What if it's a trap? What if they're not who they say they are? It doesn't matter, Ethan replied. Even if it's a risk, it's better than sitting here waiting to die. With no time to waste, they began preparing for the journey. Using spare parts scavenged from the hub, they worked tirelessly to repair their derelict cargo vessel, a small ship barely large enough for 2 people. The engines sputtered to life after hours of effort, but the hull was weak, and the navigation system was unreliable. Still, it was their only option. As they prepared to leave, Ethan paused to look back at the communications hub. It had been their home for so long, a place where they had kept humanity's voice alive, even after everything else was gone. Leaving it behind felt like saying goodbye to the last piece of Earth they had left. "Ready?" Rachel asked, standing beside him. Ethan took a deep breath. "As ready as I'll ever be." The journey ahead was daunting, but for the first time in months, they had a purpose. The Concordance's message had given them hope, not just for survival, but for redemption. Maybe, just maybe, they could find a new beginning among the stars. As the ship launched into the darkness, Ethan and Rachel held on to that hope tightly. They didn't know what awaited them at the Concordance's outpost, or if they would even make it there, but they had taken the first step. And for now, that was enough. The journey to the Concordance's outpost was anything but smooth. Ethan and Rachel's small cargo vessel groaned under the strain of its damaged systems, each passing hour bringing new challenges. The engines sputtered unpredictably, forcing them to make constant adjustments just to stay on course. Supplies were limited, and sleep became a luxury neither could afford. Yet they pressed on, driven by the slim hope that salvation awaited them at their destination. As they traveled deeper into uncharted space, they encountered remnants of humanity's fall. On one asteroid, they discovered the wreckage of a human colony ship, its hull torn open like a tin can. Inside, they found evidence of a desperate struggle: broken furniture, scattered belongings, and scorch marks from weapons fire. It was clear the architects had been there, leaving no survivors behind. Ethan tried not to dwell on the site as they scavenged what little fuel and spare parts they could find. "We're lucky," he muttered bitterly. They didn't get the chance to run. Rachel didn't respond. Her face was pale as she worked, her hands trembling slightly as she loaded supplies onto their ship. She couldn't help thinking about the people who had lived and died here, their dreams extinguished in an instant. Every abandoned settlement they passed served as a grim reminder of how fragile life was, and how close they were to meeting the same fate. Their darkest moment came when they stumbled upon another survivor. While searching a derelict mining station for resources, they heard a faint tapping sound coming from inside. Following it led them to Olivia Grant, a young mechanic with dirt-streaked cheeks and haunted eyes. She had been hiding in the shadows for weeks, surviving on scraps and sheer determination. At first, Olivia was wary of Ethan and Rachel, unsure whether to trust them. But hunger and exhaustion eventually overcame her fear. She told them how her family had been taken by the architects during a raid, leaving her alone to fend for herself. Her voice cracked as she described watching the machines dismantle everything around her without mercy or reason. "You're heading somewhere safe?" Olivia asked after sharing her story. When Ethan nodded, she pleaded, "Take me with you. I don't care where we go. I just want to fight back." Though hesitant at first, Ethan and Rachel agreed to bring her along. Olivia's skills proved invaluable almost immediately. She patched up their failing navigation system and rigged the engines to run more efficiently, buying them precious time. In return, she found a sense of purpose she hadn't felt since losing her family. Together, the three of them formed an uneasy but determined team, united by a shared desire to survive and to resist. As they neared the midpoint of their journey, tensions began to rise. The closer they got to the Concordance's outpost, the more uncertain they became about what awaited them. Was the coalition truly willing to help? Or would they be turned away, or worse, captured? One night, as they floated through the endless void, Rachel voiced her fears aloud. What if this is all for nothing? What if we're walking into another trap? Ethan didn't answer right away. He stared out the window at the sea of stars stretching endlessly before them. Finally, he spoke, his voice steady despite the doubt gnawing at him. We'll deal with that when we get there. For now, we keep moving forward. Olivia nodded in agreement. If we stop now, we die. That's the only thing I'm sure of. And so, they continued onward, clinging to the fragile thread of hope that had kept them alive this far. Each star they passed brought them closer to answers, and perhaps to a new beginning. But the road ahead remained uncertain, filled with dangers they couldn't yet imagine. Daniel and Grace faced a storm of trouble after sharing their findings with their superiors. Their report about humanity's role in provoking the architects didn't sit well with the people in charge. Instead of sparking action or reflection, it ignited anger and fear. To some, their theory sounded like betrayal, an accusation that humanity had somehow brought its destruction upon itself. You're saying we deserve this? One official snapped during a tense meeting. His face was red, his fists clenched on the table. That Earth's billions died because of our own mistakes. No, Daniel replied firmly, though his voice wavered under the pressure. We're saying we need to understand what happened. If we provoked the architects, then maybe we can find a way to avoid making the same mistakes again. But his words fell on deaf ears. The government labeled their research as dangerous and ordered them to stop digging into the past. Worse, they accused Daniel and Grace of treason, claiming their work could damage morale and incite panic. It wasn't long before armed guards showed up at their lab, demanding they hand over all their data. Grace stood frozen, her heart pounding as she watched the soldiers confiscate their equipment. This is insane, she whispered to Daniel. They're silencing us because they don't want the truth to get out. Daniel nodded grimly. If we stay here, they'll bury everything we've discovered. We can't let that happen. That night, they packed what little they could salvage and fled under the cover of darkness. They knew they couldn't fight the system head-on, not without help. But where could they turn? Who would believe them? Their answer came in the form of Dr. Nathan Cole, a rogue scientist known for his unorthodox ideas and fierce independence. Years ago, he had been part of a team studying ways to communicate with alien life, but his radical theories got him exiled from mainstream science. Now, he led a small group of researchers operating outside the law, dedicated to finding peaceful solutions to galactic conflicts. When Daniel and Grace reached out to him, Nathan wasted no time offering his support. You're right to keep pushing, he told them during their first meeting. The architects aren't just mindless killers. They're machines following a program. If we can figure out how to reprogram them, maybe we can stop this cycle of destruction. Nathan introduced them to his team, a mix of engineers, linguists, and programmers working tirelessly in a hidden underground facility. Together, they began developing experimental technology designed to interface with the architect's systems. The goal was ambitious: to hack into their programming and rewrite the rules that govern their behavior. As days turned into weeks, tensions grew between Daniel and Grace. Daniel believed their best chance was to intervene directly, using Nathan's tools to confront the architects head-on. We can't wait around hoping someone else will fix this, he argued. If we have the means to act, we have to take the risk. Grace, however, wasn't convinced. Rushing in blindly could make things worse, she countered. What if we trigger another attack? What if we fail and lose everything? Despite their disagreements, they worked side by side, driven by a shared determination to protect what remained of humanity. Each breakthrough brought them closer to their goal, but also closer to danger. They knew the architects wouldn't hesitate to strike if they detected any interference. One evening, as they reviewed their progress, Grace looked at Daniel with a mixture of hope and dread. "Do you really think this will work?" she asked softly. "I don't know," Daniel admitted, "but doing nothing isn't an option. We owe it to Earth, and to everyone still fighting, to try." And so, they pressed on, their resolve hardening with every challenge they faced. Whatever lay ahead, they were ready to face it together. The journey to the Concordance's outpost was nearing its end, but danger loomed closer than ever. Ethan, Rachel, and Olivia were exhausted, their bodies pushed to the limit by weeks of constant repairs and restless nights. The ship groaned with every passing hour, its battered systems struggling to stay operational. They knew they couldn't keep going much longer. Then, without warning, the alarms blared. A swarm of architect drones appeared on their scanners, closing in fast. Panic gripped the small crew as they scrambled to evade the machines. Ethan clenched the controls, his knuckles white, as he tried to maneuver the ship through a narrow asteroid field. Behind them, the drones fired relentlessly, their beams slicing through space like deadly spears. "We're not going to make it," Olivia shouted, her voice shaking as she worked frantically to reroute power to the failing engines. Rachel grabbed the back of Ethan's seat, her eyes glued to the viewport. "There has to be something we can do." Just as despair began to take hold, a sudden burst of light filled the darkness. A fleet of unfamiliar ships emerged from behind a nearby moon, their sleek designs glinting in the starlight. Without hesitation, they opened fire on the architect drones, driving them back with precision and force. Ethan stared in disbelief as the enemy retreated. "Who are they?" he whispered. Before anyone could answer, a voice crackled over the comm system. "This is Captain Hayes of the research vessel Solace. Do not attempt to flee. We are here to assist." Ethan exchanged a glance with Rachel. Could this be real? Or was it another trap? Should we trust them? Olivia asked, her hands hovering over the controls. "We don't have a choice," Ethan replied. He activated the comms. "This is Ethan Carter aboard the cargo vessel Echo. We're damaged and low on supplies. Requesting assistance." Moments later, the Solace docked with their ship, and its crew boarded. To Ethan's astonishment, he recognized Daniel Hayes, the man who had intercepted Earth's final message, and Grace Bennett, the scientist who had pieced together humanity's role in provoking the architects. For a moment, no one spoke. The weight of their shared history hung heavy in the air. "You're the ones who sent the message," Daniel said finally, his voice tinged with awe. "You kept Earth's voice alive." Ethan nodded slowly. "We did what we could, but Earth's gone now." Grace stepped forward, her expression softening. "We know, and we're sorry for your loss, but you're not alone anymore." Under the protection of the Solace, the Echo limped toward the Concordance's outpost. Along the way, Daniel and Grace explained their mission: to understand the architects and find a way to stop them. They shared their theory about reprogramming the machines, as well as the risks involved. Ethan listened intently, his mind racing with possibilities. "If you succeed," he said when they finished, "you might give humanity a second chance. But if we fail," Grace added quietly, "it could mean the end of everything." Olivia spoke up, her voice firm despite her exhaustion. "Then we'll help you. Humanity owes it to itself to fight back, not just for survival, but for redemption." By the time they reached the outpost, an uneasy alliance had formed. The Concordance greeted them cautiously, their leaders wary of involving themselves in humanity's struggles. But Ethan's impassioned plea, and the evidence brought by Daniel and Grace, convinced them to offer refuge and resources. As the group prepared for the next phase of their mission, Ethan felt a flicker of hope he hadn't felt in years. For the first time since Earth fell, he believed they might stand a chance against the machines that had taken everything from them. Whatever came next, they would face it together. The council chambers of the Concordance were vast and imposing, filled with representatives from dozens of species. Each delegate sat in silence, their faces unreadable as Ethan stepped forward to speak. He felt small under their gaze, but he forced himself to stand tall. This was humanity's moment, not just to ask for help, but to explain why Earth had fallen and what it meant for the galaxy. Ethan took a deep breath and began. "My name is Ethan Carter, and I am one of the last voices of Earth. Our planet is gone, destroyed by the architects. Before we died, we sent a message, a warning. You chose this war." He paused, letting the words hang in the air. But the truth is more complicated than that. Humanity didn't start this fight, but we may have caused it. He went on to describe how humanity had broadcasted signals into space, hoping to make contact with alien life. He admitted that they hadn't understood the risks, that their curiosity might have been seen as aggression by the architects. "We made mistakes," he said, his voice steady despite the weight of his words. "But those mistakes don't justify genocide. If there's any hope for peace, we need to understand the architects and stop them before they destroy anyone else." When Ethan finished, the room erupted into murmurs. Some delegates nodded in agreement, while others shook their heads in frustration. A tall, silver-skinned ambassador stood, his voice echoing through the chamber. "Your story is tragic, but it does not change the facts. The architects are relentless. They cannot be reasoned with." Grace stepped forward then, her tone calm but firm. "That's not entirely true. The architects are machines. They follow programming. If we can access their systems, we might be able to reprogram them. It's risky, but it's possible." A heated debate followed. Some factions argued that humanity deserved no aid after provoking such devastation. Others believed that helping Earth's survivors could lead to a solution that benefited all civilizations. Finally, a compromise emerged. The Concordance would provide resources and safe passage for those willing to assist in Grace's plan. However, they warned that failure would come at a great cost. As the meeting adjourned, Ethan felt a mix of relief and dread. They had allies now, but the road ahead was uncertain. Back aboard the Solace, Daniel and Olivia worked alongside Grace to refine their experimental technology. Days turned into weeks as they tested and retested their equipment, knowing that one mistake could doom them all. During this time, Ethan found himself reflecting on everything that had happened. He thought about the family he had lost, the home he would never see again, and the choices that had led humanity to this point. For so long, he had carried guilt and anger, blaming the architects and himself for Earth's destruction. But now, standing among people who still believed in hope, he began to feel something else: purpose. One evening, as the group prepared for their mission, Rachel approached him. "Do you think this will work?" she asked quietly. "I don't know," Ethan admitted. "But I do know one thing. We're not running anymore. We're fighting back. And maybe, just maybe, that's enough." The day finally came when they were ready to confront the architects. Armed with the Concordance's support and their own determination, they set out toward the heart of the machine's network. Fear lingered in every heartbeat, but so did resolve. Whatever happened next, they would face it together. Ethan looked around at the faces of his companions, Rachel, Olivia, Daniel, Grace, and felt a flicker of pride. Humanity wasn't perfect, but it had always been resilient. Even in the face of impossible odds, it refused to give up. As the ship entered enemy territory, Ethan whispered to himself, "For Earth."